Mr. Robert Halfon.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I congratulate again my honourable friend for securing the debate. Whilst I disagree with everything he said, I'm grateful for that he challenges my views and those of others who oppose his motion. And I've got three fundamental points to make. First, the honourable gentleman said there was no smoking gun. Well, I would argue actually there's a big smoking gun and that Iran is building a nuclear bomb. Second, their nuclear program is not a response to sanctions. It was happening already. And third, if Iran had a bomb, we cannot be sure that they would not use one, either directly or indirectly through one of the many terrorist organisations they support. And it's worth examining these points in turn. First, is Iran building a nuclear bomb? Now, the IAEA report from November 2011 clearly states that Iran has acquired the knowledge, the technology and the resources to create a nuclear bomb within months. Its main findings were, and I quote from Section G, paragraph 43, that Iran has procured nuclear-related equipment and materials, acquired nuclear weapons development information and documentation from a clandestine nuclear supply network, and worked on the development of an indigenous design of a nuclear weapon, including the testing of components. But put this aside for 1 minute. What do Arab nations in the region say? They are in no doubt what the Iranians are planning. As far back as in 2008, King Abdullah of Saudi Arabia urged the United States to cut the head off the snake and halt Iran's nuclear program. Last week I was in Kurdistan in northern Iraq, and the Kurds know too well what a nuclear Iran would be, and incredibly concerned about the implications. And that is what is at stake in the region. Now, this is not a response to sanctions. We cannot appease Iran or hope for moderates to emerge from within the regime. Nuclear ambition is not a response to sanctions. It was happening already. United Nations sanctions began in 2006 in response to Iran's refusal to suspend uranium enrichment. But as far back as 2002, the National Council of Resistance of Iran revealed Iran's secret nuclear program, much of which was later admitted by the Iranian leadership on state television. Tehran has repeatedly dismissed calls to negotiate, and President Ahmadinejad now insists his nuclear program is unstoppable. The only time Iran has suspended uranium enrichment, cooperated with the UN and signed the full non-proliferation treaty was in October 2003. Why October 2003? Because at that time, 250,000 of Western troops had just toppled Saddam Hussein in Iraq, and they were close to Iran's western border. As soon as that threat diminished, Iran returned to its nuclear program, which has led us to this point today. Now, third, we cannot be sure that Iran would not use a nuclear bomb. Iranian leaders have made numerous statements calling for the destruction of the State of Israel and the Jewish people. Just last week, the Iranian website Aleph published an article by Khomeini's strategy chief Alizera Fogani detailing plans for the extermination of Israel. As British newspapers have reported, the dossier even pinpoints the housing estates with the highest concentration of Jewish people. Now, this piece, which is now being run on most state Iran-owned sites, says that because of the United States presidential elections, the time for Iran to strike is now. Last week, Iran's defense ministry announced that it tested a two-stage ballistic missile which could deliver a nuclear bomb. Earlier this month, the Deputy Prime Minister of Israel said he had intelligence showing that these missiles had a range of 6,200 kilometres, enough to hit the United States and the United Kingdom. Now, I've described in the House as a past that Iran is the new Soviet Union of the Middle East. It represses its people at home and it has expansionist aims abroad. It's widely recognised as the world's leading state sponsor of terrorism. It provides support to insurgent groups in Iraq and Afghanistan, which have attacked and killed British troops. And a nuclear Iran does not just mean a nuclear Iran. It means a nuclear Hezbollah, a nuclear Hamas, and so forth. As former Iranian President and Ayatollah Rafsanjani said, application of an atomic bomb would not leave anything in Israel. But the extremists in charge of Iran do not just see their conflict as with their neighbours. they also see it with the West. That is why they threatened to bomb Turkey last year. In 2006, Hassan Abbasi, the head of the Iranian Center for Strategic Studies, said Britain's demise is on our agenda. He also added that we have a strategy drawn up for the destruction of Anglo-Saxon civilization. We must make use of everything we have at hand to strike at this front by means of our suicide operations or by means of missiles. Now, in conclusion, Mr. Speaker, the Foreign Secretary has described the Iranian nuclear threat as the new Cold War. But it may be worse, because in the past, nuclear deterrence worked because of mutually assured destruction, MAD, and clear lines of communication. But for MAD to work, you have to be sane, and the Iranian regime has shown itself not to be. As we see from their constant human rights abuse, their attacks on the British Embassy and their support for terrorism. Now, let this be a lesson for the free world. I mentioned last week that I'd been in Kurdistan near the Iranian border, and I met with Iranian Kurds who are persecuted by the Iranian regime. They again knew the reality of a nuclear Iran, and they said the only way it would change if there was regime change in Iran, and they asked why the West had not done more to support democratic and opposition movements in Iran, which would have made some difference and perhaps helped facilitate regime change. Finally, if I just want to quote Niall Ferguson, who wrote recently in Newsweek, "War is an evil, but sometimes a preventative war can be a lesser evil and a policy of appeasement. The people who don't know that are the ones still in denial about what a nuclear-armed Iran would end up costing us all."